We're joined this morning by Senate candidate Mark Kelly from his home in Tucson. We appreciate you taking the time with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me on, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
All right, well, let's get right to the questions here. We want to ask you first about the big news of the week. And what do you think of Governor Ducey's decision to delay the reopening of Arizona? And overall, how do you feel like he's handled this crisis?
I think it was the right decision. The governor made clear that he wants to see more of a trend and a trend of decreasing hospitalizations. That's in accordance with the CDC guidelines. They said they wanted to see 2 weeks. And it's so critical that we stop the spread of the virus. And that decision seems to be, in my opinion, seems to be the right way to go.
No, let's talk about the national level here. And how do you think the federal government is handling this? Do you think that the White House and the CDC and everyone has done enough here?
Well, we got off to a very late start. There were things that we were doing in early February that should have been done earlier than that, weeks earlier. And stuff we were doing in March clearly could have been done a month earlier than the actions we were taking. So at times, I think it's been better. It's so important that we follow the science and the data and the facts and listen to our public health professionals, and listen to the scientists. I think those are positive things. But there's also been, other things that are, kind of on the negative side.
Specifically, what do you feel like the White House could have done sooner?
Well, it was very clear early on. I mean, I just saw, we have that information now that in the president's intelligence briefings that repeatedly warned that China was suppressing information. But the White House continued to, say that China was being transparent about this. And it's pretty clear now that that was not the case. And I often see just information that comes from the White House that's not always in the best interest of the public. We clearly saw that last week.
All right, let's move on to unemployment, because that's something that is really hitting Arizonans hard. It's hitting people all across the country hard here. We're now up, because of these new numbers, up over 30 million new unemployment cases in the past 6 weeks. What would be your message to those who are struggling, and what would your plan be if you were elected?
Well, so we've got to stop the spread of the virus first. We have a public health crisis. We also have an economic crisis with hundreds of thousands of Arizonans now out of work, can't pay their bills. The unemployment benefits federally have been increased over what the state normally provides, but that's not going to last forever. So we've got to make sure that we have the backs of businesses, small businesses especially. There are 550,000 small businesses here in the state of Arizona. I think something of like 40% of Arizonans work at small businesses. We have to have their backs to make sure that those jobs are going to be available when we get through the healthcare crisis part of this and we can get back to work.
Do you feel like we as a country do have our small businesses' backs right now after what you've seen coming from the federal government?
I would say mixed. I think the intentions are good, but I also think Congress screwed this up. The Small Business Administration is not doing an adequate job administering this program. That is clear. And Congress also, set up a situation where businesses that are clearly not small businesses could go and get some of these funds, and then small businesses can't access them. I've spoken to small business owners across the state, a number of them, and almost universally, they've been having a very difficult time. Sometimes they can't get through to the Small Business Administration, or the website crashes, or they're not approved. These funds were intended for small businesses, and Congress just did not pay attention to the details.
Is there something specifically you feel like could be done, or something that you would have liked to do if you had the power to handle this a little better?
Well, I think you would put a system where there was adequate oversight right from the beginning, that under no circumstance, a big public company would be approved for something that was intended for a small business. That would not have been difficult to do. And I imagine, I'm not positive about this, but when you allow lobbyists to get involved, big corporations to get involved in setting policy. That's why when I announced that I was running for the US Senate 14 months ago, the first things I said is I'm not going to take any corporate PAC money, because the big corporation influence in our government, and that comes through The campaigns of folks that are running for Congress it results in a lot of influence at the federal level, and I'm thinking some of that might have happened as Congress created this program that was intended to help small businesses.
All right, Mark Kelly joining us here, Senate candidate in the state of Arizona. And what we love to do here on Today in AZ is get our viewers involved. We ask them for some questions that they would like to ask you. So let's get right to it here.
Okay.
This question is coming from Kenneth Overturf, and he asked, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, what is your opinion in having expanded healthcare services?
Well, we need to make sure that everybody has access to good health care that they can afford, that they can get if they have some sort of pre-existing condition, that they can keep if they get sick. We have so many Arizonans that don't have health care coverage. Recently we expanded access. I worry about these folks that are recently unemployed that are then going to lose their health care coverage, and their families are going to lose their health care coverage. We've got to make sure, this was no fault of theirs that they're recently unemployed because of a global pandemic. We've got to make sure we have their backs. Expanding healthcare access is good for the state of Arizona, and we need to continue to move in that direction.
All right, and obviously you're an expert on this. You know a little thing or two about self-isolation as a former NASA astronaut here. So with at least a couple more weeks to go, do you have any secrets or tips that you can share with us about getting through this whole self-quarantine?
Well, let me say, yeah, I've done the quarantine thing before all of my 4 space flights, actually multiple times, because sometimes they get canceled. Or they get delayed, so you wind up out of quarantine, in quarantine again. My number one thing is don't be complacent about it. It works. From our space program, we know it works. Keep people in quarantine. They're not going to get any kind of virus. They're not going to spread it. So that works. It's hard to do over a period of time. Just know that if we all agree that this is in the best interest of our state and our country, and it's the right thing to do, I think psychologically that can help you kind of push through. I think it's good that the governor said, hey, we're going to extend this for 2 weeks. It might be that we decide to extend it for another week or 2 after that. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Our country is really good at solving hard problems. Historically, we're the best at solving challenging technical problems. We're going to get through this. We're going to come out the other end. We're going to learn some things, and hopefully, if we have to deal with something like this again, we're going to be better prepared.
And you did the whole self-quarantine thing before Netflix was around. So any suggestions on what we can be doing with all of our time?
Well, if you have extra time, find a good book. We've been sharing, options. I've been, recently, reading a new book about North Korea, and find a good book. Figure out from your friends and neighbors, but most importantly, stay connected. Stay connected to your friends, your family workers, your coworkers. That's critical when you're in space. There's a telephone on the space station. You can't call up, but you can call down. And that telephone is frequently used to make sure that folks in space stay connected. And I think we're all getting better with the technology, with Zoom and FaceTime. So I encourage people to just keep doing that. I think it's really good for your personal well-being.
Senate candidate Mark Kelly joining us from his home in Tucson here this morning. Mark, thank you for the time.
It's great to be on your show. Thank you very much.